earlier on you said that you're a fan of baseball when you're talking about starting up your website, and you love the game. How much was your love for the game tested, though, during those 19 years of moving around and, playing in the majors and then going down to the minors?
I never stopped loving playing. Obviously, the business part of it at times could get frustrating. But once you stop loving it, it's going to show up in your preparation and your work, and the game's going to let you know that it's no longer time. So even at the end for me, I was 39 years old. My very last pitch I threw was in the Dominican Republic in the postseason in January 2013. I was really hoping to go to camp with somebody, and I wanted to throw a professional pitch at age 40. I turned 40 in March, and I just thought that would be kind of neat and try to take one last shot at it. I was having so much fun trying to be a side armor after spending a few years in Asia and finishing out my overhand career there, if you will. But no, my passion, it really never ended, even though there were times where you were discouraged about the path and where we were. I mentioned getting released. It wasn't the first time. The first time you get released, it can be really jarring. And had gotten released in the middle of a season in 2002. And that was a tough one, but my passion did not change. Go home, continue to work, continue to throw, and talked to so many guys over the years, and even toward the end, they said, guys that were done, teammates of mine that had retired, they all said the same thing. Go as long as you can. Go as long as you have the passion to prepare, and make them tear the uniform off of you. And I can certainly walk away after those 19 years and say, yeah, that's how it went for me, and I loved every step of it.
I think that's one of the things that when we talk about baseball being a game of failure, it almost always seems to be about batting average. But, what you just described, CJ, I think is something that our listeners really should understand and hear is it's a game of failure because you get released a lot, because you get designated for assignment, because you get sent to the minors, right? There's so many moments where you think you've got it, or you're close, or you could pitch in the big leagues, and you're not getting the opportunity. And I think that's one of maybe the lessons that we don't talk about enough in the game.
Yeah, there were definitely times where I thought an opportunity would have been mine. Even that spring training in 2006, I thought I had a decent chance at making that team and had a really good spring. It never happened, and I spent the entire year in the minor leagues, and even went through a tough time at one point in the middle of that season because an opportunity to go to Japan came up. And the Pirates just didn't allow it because they didn't like the fee they were getting in return, even though they probably had no plans for me at that point. Once the season went in the tank, they're not really going to be calling up the old guys that are down in AAA, and they just did not like the fee that was coming their way. And so they denied me an opportunity. That was a really frustrating moment for me because, again, I was 33 years old. I didn't know how much time I had left. I had an opportunity to go get a payday in Japan, and the people that were in control of letting that happen would not allow it to happen. So you do have those really frustrating moments along the way. You have a lot of failure, a lot of success. It comes along with it. But I learned quickly, right? How do you respond to it? It's all about how do you respond to the failure. I mentioned some of the mistakes I made early, responding the wrong way and just trying to survive and keep my head above water and stay in the game. And that's not a recipe for success. I was able to come out of the other end of that and continue on, but with a much different attitude and appreciation for what we were doing.
You mentioned just then about the first time that you were released. It kind of came out of not left field, but it seems like it was a bit more of a shock for you. What lessons did you learn directly from there that you could pass on to the next generation of baseballers, where you could be like, hey, this is going to happen, this is how it happens, and here's the best way that you can deal with it based off the way that you learned?
You only have so much control, and it really isn't even that much, right? Especially for us as pitchers, once the baseball comes out of your hand, you can do everything right, and you could have a negative result. You could do everything wrong and have a positive result. A lot of hitters will miss very hittable pitches and get themselves out. And then you start looking big picture. And I had a really bad run. I was in Memphis in AAA with the Cardinals when I had gotten released. Nothing was going right. And the way I got there was that I opted out of my contract with the Huston Astros. I was pitching in AAA for them. Things were going well. And I had an out clause in my contract. I said, I want to go try this. And it went horrible for 6 weeks. I was in shock about how bad it went. My faith in the game and myself really was tested. I mentioned, getting released later. But I remember my rookie year in 1995. I played with a guy by the name of Mike Christopher. And Mike Christopher was probably, I want to say he was 30 or 31 years old as a rookie in 1995. And I specifically remember him saying, everybody needs to get released at least once. And I thought to myself, no way, no thank you, not interested. Can't imagine that'll happen to me, right? This is my first full year in baseball. And even though I was having some struggles, I'm like, well, that's, first round pick, left-handed. Like, I'm not going to get released. And I thought about him when it happened 7 years later, and he was absolutely right. There was something about going through that. Again, you're at your lowest point where a team tells you, especially for me at that point in AAA, that we don't want you anymore. You can't even help us here in the minor leagues. The previous year was my best year from a financial standpoint. I was making a 7-figure salary, and now here I was, not even a year later, getting released by a team saying, no, we don't want you in AAA anymore. So my reaction there, again, I think I had just gotten so used to all the moving around. I had a little bit more perspective, I think, on life and how things work. And as much as I was frustrated by how it went and how I was used and thought that they could have put me in some better situations and I could have succeeded more, it wasn't meant to be. And so you move on, you get released. And I will tell you that I was home for a couple of weeks, really wondering at that point. Now, I was 29 years old and saying, is this it? Is this my career over? I'm home in the middle of the summer. I'd never been home in the middle of the summer before. And I continued to work out and throw and try to do all the right things. And, for me, it was a time of my faith getting tested in myself, where I was spiritually, and just trying to put all my faith in that and begging for just one more chance. And I got one. A couple weeks later, I went to AAA with the Texas Rangers. And about 3 weeks later after that, I was called back up to the big leagues and pitching in Yankee Stadium. And so it was a testament to the faith in yourself, in maybe kind of a higher purpose and understanding your purpose of life and what you really have control of and what you don't. But ultimately, how you respond in those moments. You can make excuses, you can blame others, but at the end of the day, it's going to be on you.
So you mentioned just then as well about control and how once you release the ball, it could be you could do everything right in the lead up to, but then you could have a bad pitch. And the next one, it could be a really bad release, and then suddenly, it's a strike, however it may play out. So then what happened when you hit 3 batters in a row?
Yeah, so I have that major league record, or tied it. Well, there was a lot to that story, but that was in 1998. I was pitching for the Huston Astros. There was some frustration building on some things that were happening between me and one of the coaches on the staff, and a moment on a plane that should have never happened that he initiated when there was too many drinks being had. And so I went into that series just kind of a little stressed out to begin with, and went through an inning and actually threw a pretty good inning. And these are the kind of things you should be thinking about. I learned that later, but I remember at the time after I threw that inning, I was like, I think my ERA now is actually under a 3. I was kind of excited about that. Stupid things like that you should not be thinking about. Go back out for the next inning, and I actually threw a pretty good pitch. I believe it was 0-2, and it was a broken bat base hit. And it started to rain a little bit, and I remember some of the frustration that had spilled over with the personal thing that was going on with the coach really started to bubble. And I started kind of having this anger in me, and it was much too hyped for probably what was going on. Like, I threw a pretty good 0-2 pitch, and a guy broke his bat and got a base hit. And all of a sudden, I started overthrowing. There was a lefty that I was trying to go away on and ended up hitting him. I'm trying to go away as a left-handed pitcher, and up hitting him. So I missed my spot by probably 3 feet. Then I threw a pitch to a righty. It was a cutter or slider that took off a little bit too much and hit him in the foot. And so now it was building and building and building. And I was facing Craig Counsell with the bases loaded and nobody out, and kind of thought I had myself gathered again and got into a 2-strike count, and the catcher called for a 2-seam fastball in. So me as a left-handed pitcher, that means arm side. I'm going to try to throw the ball in, and it's going to run into him. I did not throw that pitch with conviction. I tried to place it in there, just kind of hoping for the best result, and didn't let it go. And when that happens more often than not, you're either going to cut the pitch or it's going to sail on you. And that pitch sailed on me and hit Craig Counsell right in the jaw. Broke his jaw. I got taken out of the game. At that point, I hit by pitch led to a run. 3 more, all 3 others came around to score, and it turned into a disaster of an outing. I pitched one more time, and that got sent down to the big leagues. But what I took away from that, in that moment in 1998, that was my first year in the bullpen, was trying to manage the things off the field, and then also trying to manage innings, and not having that, what we call that runaway inning, right? The runaway train. When things start going bad, how can you limit the damage? I learned that later in my career, and I felt like I got pretty good at it. A guy hits a leadoff double, pretty good chance he's going to score. Maybe he might not, but what can happen is 3-run score here, depending on what's going on in the game. And I found myself being able to execute and understanding those moments as time went on. But that game got away from me. Craig Counsell comes on our radio show once a week, and so he's been really good about it and laughed about it. But at the time, I felt absolutely horrible. He broke his jaw, missed the rest of the season, and it was just a brutal night. A lot of emotion going on in that game.
So did you have any sort of keywords you'd use on yourself when especially if you're in the middle of a game, that you'd tell yourself to kind of bring yourself back to the here and now moment, or something that would remind you of perhaps what another teammate had told you? So did you have keywords? Words? Did you write something on your hand? What did you have to kind of bring you back in the moment to make sure that you were calm and focused on what you needed to perform?
Yeah, I did. In 2003, I had somebody ask me to do one of these kind of personality tests where it was 300 words, check off the ones that you think describe you. And I was like, this is silly. And sure enough, it spit out this kind of deal. And there was a couple of things that really spoke to me, like the top 2 or 3. I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize that. That seems pretty accurate. Now, I don't know how good those things are, but the things that came away were a couple of keywords for me, and I kept it really simple: less self-critical, more aggressive. That test revealed that about me, and it even said, "Hey, you're probably a really good teammate. You're probably a really good guy, and you like your teammates and all that good stuff. But here's an area where you probably lack." Again, I don't know how they do that, what the validity is on only checking off words that you think describe you, but that's what I ended up, and I wrote that down actually on the door of my hotel room that spring training, going to spring every day with the Texas Rangers. And that was following the year in which I told you I had gotten released, right in the middle of summer for the first time. It was that offseason that test had happened, and I was trying to make a team with the Rangers. And that was right on my door, right above the lock. And I saw it every day and said, less self-critical, more aggressive. And that was kind of where I was. And I didn't have the greatest spring, I had an up and down spring, but I ended up making the team, good enough to at least to make the team. And that was something. I think keeping it simple that I always went to. I started keeping notes later in my career. I wish I'd done that earlier. Good outings, bad outings, what happened there. Go back and read it, flip through it while you're traveling around the bus, whatever, maybe you're just sitting around the clubhouse before a start or just before a game when I was in the bullpen. And a lot of those little notes along the way for me, just keeping it really simple and short. But what happened in this mistake? Why did this inning get away? Is there something there you can take away from that to make sure that doesn't happen again, or at least that you're better prepared mentally for when it probably will happen again?